to the Opinionated Benchwarmers podcast, episode 202. Your Opinionated Benchwarmers are back to do what we do best, and that's discuss sports. Ramon, man, the NFL picture is becoming a little clearer. We're getting closer to the NFL playoffs. I think it's just wide open right now. I'm excited about NFL and how things are kind of panning out, man. What about you?
Yeah, nah, same man. It's always kind of exciting, interesting time. This has been kind of a little bit interesting season for me, obviously, with where my Colts started and then kind of
Yeah,
how things have gone off the rails. So it's made it a little bit kind of bittersweet, honestly. But still exciting, and I think that also too, it as you already kind of alluded to, is pretty much wide open. Like I don't think that right now we'll probably get into it, but I don't think that right now, if I just put you on the spot and said who you think is going to win it all. I don't think that you could say that with any type of conviction right now to
yeah,
say, I truly believe that this is the best team. So
yeah.
definitely an interesting time.
Yeah, over the next 30 minutes, we'll try to get to some type of conclusion. But like you said, we'll try to dissect everything. But shout out to you, the listener that's here, that's giving us a shout out right here, man. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast, wherever you like to listen to your podcast at. We're on every platform. And make sure that you're subscribed to our YouTube. That's how you get that good content when we drop episodes. And you can check us out there as well. We appreciate all the love and support that we've been receiving over these last few weeks. It keeps us going. Man, shout out to you. We're glad that you're with us. Best podcast, sports podcast in the world. So, man, but yeah, like you said, Ramon, let's jump into it, man. The NFL, it's been kind of weird. I do think that there are a lot of teams that are starting to kind of peak right now at the right time. And the one that comes off, we got to just talk about last night. First of all, the Steelers. I know that people will laugh and say that the Dolphins aren't that great, which they are correct, but the Dolphins been kind of scrappy the last month or so. And then the Steelers just blew them out the water. Of course, dissect we have to dissect their coaching, the decision that he made in the fourth quarter and the second half in general, and his clock management. But first, we'll have to start off giving credit to the Steelers and how they're looking. More so, Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back games with 200 yards passing. He's looking like Aaron Rodgers of old. His confidence really showed last night. And, if they could find a way to get DK Metcalf rolling, you saw how he flicked Minka last night like he was a fly on his way to a 30 or 40-yard touchdown. I mean, the Steelers are, I will say this, at least my eyebrow is raised and I'm interested in what they could do in the final stretch of the season.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. As we've seen over the years, we know what Mike Tomlin means, and we know what the consistency that has been there with that organization over the years. And really wanted to see how could a guy like Aaron Rodgers potentially hold up throughout the course of the season. We kind of saw him have a little bit of a downtime, obviously with that tenure with the Jets, and not being an ideal tenure over there. And so to see him kind of with the Steelers and as you've alluded to last night, I think going 23 for 27, 224 yards, two touchdowns, having a solid game, really trying to get those weapons. The ball was pretty much spread across to several different of the weapons that they have at this particular point. So I think that, with where things kind of sit in this open landscape, it gives a team like the Steelers, when you have a coach like Mike Tomlin and you have a veteran leader like Aaron Rodgers, a shot just like anybody else. I'm still, if I want to be real about it, I'm still not totally convinced about their receiving talent beyond what DK Metcalf, represents. I know that a lot of times they really honestly have to get the backs involved in the receiving game, and so you see Gainwell has been involved in that. We know what Jalen Warren can represent there. But that's my only kind of hesitancy for them at this particular point as it relates to offensively. I don't see like a lot of talent at the receiver position beyond DK Metcalf. But I think that honestly, with the way that the league sits at this point and being pretty much wide open, you can't put it past them having an opportunity to make a run. So, it's interesting. And obviously, you know, with the game against the Dolphins, it's one of those things like give credit where credit is due. But you kind of alluded to it. If we are real with it too, the Dolphins are kind of in a little bit of a tailspin. There's a lot that's up in the air. There's even some concerns of whether their QB situation whether that may be taking a little bit of a shift in the turn. I know it's not definite that Tua is going to be the guy going forward. I think that, McDaniel said that he's, looking at all potential options that are out there. So, with that being said, Steelers, they're looking better, look like they have somewhat of a chance. But also too, as you talked, the competition wasn't the greatest as well too.
Not at all. But here they are sitting 8-6 on top of that AFC North in the division, one game ahead of the 7-7 Baltimore Ravens. So I mean they have a real shot at winning this division. They do have, next 2 to 3 games will be tough. They have the Lions, which I'm looking forward to coming up this Sunday, which the Lions are spiraling, which we'll get into probably in a moment. We're not talking about them how we were talking about them a few weeks ago, for sure, as one of the top teams in the NFC. And that goes into our conversation of the NFC being wide open. But they really have a real opportunity to finish at the top of that division, squeaking in the playoffs. And like you said, my concerns are the same with their wide receiver too. I mean, when you bring in Adam Thielen, who's pretty much on his way out the league, and you bring in MVS, who actually performed well with the Saints last year. I was quite impressed with what he was able to do with us with the deep ball. He was the only spark we had last year offensively when Olave went down. But needless to say, when you're bringing in these types of veteran and these types of guys that have been journeymen for the past 3 to 4 seasons, that lets you know that they have no confidence in Calvin Austin, and they don't have a second weapon behind DK. And heck, they can't even get DK involved. And I thought that it was a DK problem, but like I mentioned earlier, when I saw him show that strength and that stiff arm against Miko on his way to a touchdown and that explosive speed, I was like, he still got it. It's not him. I don't even know if it's Aaron Rodgers. It's just that defense are able to just
Yeah,
cover DK and focus on him, and they're
yeah.
not worried about no one else.
Yeah, and I think that that's the exact point right there. I think that when you present and only have that one weapon, that's why, you had situations like in Cincinnati why it's worked out so well for Jamar Chase is because what we know has been there in T. Higgins. Now I know it's a crazy time to say that with T being out this past weekend,
Yeah.
but with that being said, just an example, when you can kind of key in on one guy, it makes it so much more difficult for that guy. And I think that that is the thing that has me kind of a little pause as it relates to what the outlook from the postseason standpoint looks like, because we know when game planning gets set in the postseason, that teams are going to hone in on that and look to take DK away and see what those other weapons can do. And so that's the only thing that kind of gives me a little bit of pause there. Hopefully that backfield that they have and what Jaylen Warren has been able to do and what we saw Kenneth Gainwell really do in this past week, maybe they can provide the other weapons that can be utilized for a run.
So as we continue this conversation about the NFL playoffs, obviously, and dissecting the NFC North, I mean AFC North, with the Steelers, when you look at the Ravens' path to the end of the season, here they got this week they got the Patriots, who we all know and we all have respected the Patriots despite their close loss to the Bills this past weekend. I still think that the Patriots are legitimate. And then they have to go to Green Bay. And I understand they did lose Michael Parsons, which we'll get into as well. Um, but then they face those Steelers that to wrap up the week in the season finale. So the Steelers really have a real pathway to win that division and get into the playoffs. So I don't know how you feel. I think that I'm gonna say it. I think the Steelers will win that division.
Yeah,
Um, I don't. I want to know your thoughts on that. How do you
yeah.
who you feel like is gonna finish out that division?
Yeah, no, I agree with you because I think that it all comes down to what's going to be that final week matchup. And the thing that has concerned me still ultimately about Baltimore is that once we've seen Lamar come back from that injury, he still hasn't been the same. Like there's just been something that hasn't been that same Lamar that we're used to and accustomed to. And I think that if you don't have peak Lamar Jackson, that obviously compromises that team. Now we know what happened this weekend and what they did to Cincinnati, but I still think that ultimately when you look at the path and see that they have to play each other, but then also, as you already alluded to, just the tougher schedule that inevitably that Baltimore has, and then knowing that Pittsburgh is a game ahead of them already right now. So
Yeah.
Baltimore is playing catch up with a tougher schedule I think that, ultimately Pittsburgh ends up winning that division.
And it was calling for Coach Tomlin head last week, and now look at him again. Just fine. He just finds a way to do enough. He's not gonna do a lot more. He's not gonna do less. He's gonna do what he needs to do to get into the playoffs. And my final point on the Steelers, because I want to move on here. We got a little bit more to get into, but I will say, you let Aaron Rodgers with his pedigree and with his veteran and with his veteran savviness and get into the playoffs, and with him playing like he's playing right now with the confidence that he showed last night. I know that the competition wasn't where is a fair competition to judge him off of, but when I look at how he's looking, I mean, I think that they could be a scrappy, scary team in the playoffs, especially when you're looking at where they would have to go. I think the only team that they would really have to fear, honestly, from a veteran post game, postseason aspect, is the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. But if you look at it, I mean, they're going to probably face Drake May if they make the playoffs. Drake May has never been on that type of stage. He's played well, MVP caliber type NFL season, but we hadn't seen him on this stage yet. I mean, who's to say? Who's to say that Aaron Rodgers couldn't play well enough to will them to a mini Super Bowl run? Dare I say it? I don't want Steelers fans to go too crazy because I know a couple of them. I live with one, so
Yeah, yeah, no, no. To your that, I mean, that's a very excellent point. I don't buy it long term of them being able to make that type of run, but it wouldn't be an ultimate surprising thing. By based upon what we talk about it being wide open, and you alluding to the young quarterbacks that are there. As far as we know that Drake May has not had that type of experience. Bo Nix has not had that type of experience. When we see what's going on, even in the South, Trevor Lawrence hasn't had that type of experience. We can't say necessarily that we 100% we thought CJ Stroud was that guy, and he's maybe been a little bit better again recently, but you can't say with full conviction that okay, definitively he's going to go on that type of run. And so ultimately, to your point, Buffalo sits in probably the best seat in the best spot because you do know that Josh Allen presents and has the capabilities to do that. So to your point, once again, there's not much that would surprise me, honestly, in this playoff run, in this playoff picture. I can't say that that's where I would say that ultimately I would rest and believe that it's going to happen, but anything can happen really in this playoff picture.
yeah, and we would be irresponsible to discuss how poorly Mike McDaniel's continued to do in coaching his team. There's no more. There's plenty of examples, but you look at how he handled that fourth quarter, being down 25 points, no hurry up offense. Drive took about 4 to 5 minutes, score a touchdown. No onside kick. And then all of a sudden you want to speed it up with 3 minutes left and try to kick an onside kick. He seems clueless. I think the honeymoon phase. I think if you go back into our catalog, check us out. We got a long catalog, 202 episodes if you didn't know. But we discussed this, Ramon, right? We
Yeah.
discussed this months ago on an episode. I can't pinpoint it now, but you know, the honeymoon phase is over. The silliness in the press conferences is over. The Dolphins want results, and he's not able to deliver it. I don't know how much longer they can go with him being at the helm. I mean, you say a quarterback change, but you're putting, and I don't think Tua has looked great, but I mean, I don't. I think Mike McDonald has been 65 and 34 in his career in 4 seasons, and he hasn't really done anything since that 2023 season. I believe was it yeah, where he went 11-6. I mean, at what point do the Dolphins look at that and be like, "Hey, this is not working"? Because I think at this point that I think he came from that branch of
Yeah.
Sean
Okay.
McVay,
Bright offensive
Shanahan,
mind.
yeah, young guy, but it's not working for the Dolphins. I think when you hear reports coming out that he's lost the locker room, Tyreek Hill clearly before the injury didn't want to be there. You just know that things aren't right. It's time for the Dolphins pretty much to really look at themselves and be like, hey, we need to try something different.
Well, and the thing is, I think that to your point, I think that he's realizing that, which is why it's pretty much kind of a last ditch, throw all the cards on the table, which is why you heard the reports about the potential, quarterback change come up because, now it's just kind of that moment of desperation when you know you're in over your head. And at the end of the day that maybe you're kind of looking for a little bit of a scapegoat at this point to kind of preserve yourself. And then that's the kind of tactics and the kind of methods that you use. And so, to your point, I mean, Miami has done different things. They've been aggressive. Of course, you talked about the Tyreek Hill deal that was made some years ago. They've brought in, tried to usher in and bring in talent. And it hasn't quite gotten them where they want to go. What I will say is that I think that it's a twofold deal. I think it's the head coach and I think it's the QB as well too.
Oh
I
yeah,
think it's the
yeah.
combination. I think that if
Two
you
is not
have,
it.
yeah, I don't think that Tua is that guy. And so when you begin to kind of falter on both of those aspects, it's going to go south really quickly. And so I think that that's honestly what they're facing. I think it's going to be dependent, and to be honest, I haven't looked at their schedule down the stretch. I think it's going to be dependent on how they potentially finish the season down the stretch. But it's been looking kind of ugly for the last couple of weeks. So if they can kind of continue on this road and this path, this may be his last season there. If he can kind of have a little bit of that potential heroic finish down the stretch, maybe wait one tweak here or there, then sometimes that gives them that little bit of redemption time until it ultimately settles early in the next season.
It ain't looking good, Ramon. They got the Bengals this week, they got the Bucks next week, and then they got the Patriots to wrap up the season in the season finale. So based on that schedule, I think it's a wrap for Mike McDaniels. I'd be surprised if I'd be surprised if he survives this season. They very well could go 0-3 with the Bengals, which is a conversation in itself. But we'll move along and see how this thing goes
Yep.
here. But moving on. I mean, I had an opportunity to check out the Patriots and Bills game this past Sunday. I think that potentially probably was the game of the week. I mean, Josh Allen is just on another level, man. I don't think it's said enough at how well he's able to control a game down the stretch and how clutch he is. But he got the Bills rolling. I mean, the Bills alone have been up and down this season. But that was a very impressive win for me to watch him perform the way he did in New England. Not that Drake May did a horrible job either. He's legit. But I think that you're probably looking at probably a future playoff game in that matchup there. But it was a shootout, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, ultimately when you look at the Bills, I mean, what has that been? Back-to-back weeks of 21-point comebacks, right?
Yep.
And so, you look at a team displaying that resiliency because ultimately of who they have at the helm at that quarterback position. You look at the Bills and it's not like that they have so many, weapons from a receiver standpoint. It's not like he got so many guys potentially there. But what I will say and mention about the Bills as well, too, in this season is that James Cook has been balling this season.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
James Cook, once he got paid, he has actually been worth the money that he did ultimately get paid. And so I think being able to lean on that run game and what James Cook has provided, and still ultimately when you have a guy like that in Josh Allen, it puts you in every, potential game in every situation. And I think that now a team, like Buffalo, they're kind of rubbing their hands together because really what has been along the path in the years past that has prevented them from the big time winning, that's not really going to be there. We know of what has happened with the Chiefs, obviously. Even when we think about what even potentially Joe Burrow and the Bengals could have presented in the past, like these aren't teams and these aren't guys that he's going to have to face along that playoff run. So to get back to your point, with this particular game, I think it was definitely the game of the weekend. I think it was kind of a preview of what we may see going forward, but I think it still ultimately represented that I think Buffalo still just has that little edge right now on New England, and I think is ultimately due to the experience, which I feel is going to show up even in the postseason. And right now, obviously, New England still has that lead in the division at this particular point, but I think that Buffalo, as they've already represented and shown even this past weekend, I think that they can do it in New England or potentially if they were able to kind of pull out and be able to have it, at home. So definitely going to continue to be interesting.
For sure. They definitely are the team that's trending in the right direction. But I look at the Texans, as you mentioned earlier, with CJ Stroud. They're streaking 5 games in a row, won. But then you look at your coach that's lost 4 in a row, and you know we had to get to it. Old man got off the couch. Grandpa, 44-year-old Philip Rivers, put aside his bid for the Hall of Fame by 1 year to join your Indianapolis Colts as an emergency quarterback. The floor is yours, brother. That's your team. How you feel about that?
Yeah, honestly, things have not been right since we made that that deal at the trade deadline. It seems like everything has just kind of gone the wrong way for us as an
Sauce brought that
organization.
funk from New York to
Yeah,
Indiana,
yeah, he brought
huh?
the losing ways over to Indy. And it started off by them not being able to capitalize and close some games. It brings me back to the Chiefs game, which is a game that obviously should not have lost, should not have dropped, and is very important, honestly, at this particular point. But you just look at things at this time, with Daniel Jones going down, you having to go and get an emergency quarterback. Ultimately what this says about, Anthony Richardson at this particular time and whatever else you feel that you have on the roster in order for you to have to go to get Philip Rivers at what 44 years old and be the guy at the helm of the team. And the thing about it is that still ultimately with that, we know how well even Seattle has been playing this season. That game was right there for the taking. Like it was right there for the taking. And so it shows you still ultimately the upside that this team possessed, but really at this particular point, it's not looking good, especially with what we're facing in the division at this point of two of the hottest teams. Because I mean, Jacksonville has been playing good football as well too.
Yeah, they streaking.
So you got two hot teams really in that division at this particular point. So it's definitely not looking good for my Colts at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the Philip Rivers signing. I thought that there are probably at least a short list of 3 or 4 guys that you could go get, even via trade. First that comes to mind is probably Jameis Winston. And I know James Winston can be crazy, but James Winston can still throw that, he can sling that thing, and he at least give you a shot, and he will unlock all of your weapons at the way he can move the ball around. And then the defense that you guys present is a very good defense that can get you through games. So, I mean, to get a guy that's 44 years old off the couch was kind of suspect. But y'all do have the 49ers coming up this week on Monday Night Football. That's not Now is not the time to face the 49ers, who's doing pretty well despite the injuries they continue to win. But yeah, it is interesting here. And I will put in this nugget that my rookie quarterback, Tyler Shuck, has won the most games starting as a rookie this year in 3 games, leading my New Orleans Saints. I never thought I'd be sitting here saying that, so I'm not gonna be out like I told you so. But Ramon, he looking pretty good. I gotta admit, I hated to admit it, but the way that he led that 4 minute drive against the Carolina Panthers, I gotta give it to you. We won't stay long because we talking about playoff teams, but
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty interesting, and I think at least at this point, I think that you really legitimately have a legit question. Whether what are you going to do in this draft? Because you may have a quarterback.
Yeah, I think honestly in this draft, I don't think that this is the draft for the Saints to go get a QB because I don't look at any of those guys at the top of this draft at that QB position as
Yeah,
franchise guys or franchise changers. And so I think that you would be reaching. I think that you take another year to be able to look at Shuck. You take another year to be able to assess if he can be your guy long term, and you
yeah,
roll with that. You take, whoever is the top end talent. I don't know. How it's going to fully land or where the Saints will be, but I think you look at a different position. But QB is not where the Saints needs to go in this draft. Ultimately, there's none of those guys that move the needle in this particular draft. And I think that, as you said, I mean, there's some viability there. I think that he has shown some tools. Now he is still an older young guy as well,
yeah,
so
for
hopefully he
sure.
would be showing those tools at
Yeah,
this particular point in time. But I think it's worth giving him a little bit of a time, giving him a complete, off-season training camp, coming into effect. Him knowing that he is the guy is nothing like knowing from day one that you are the guy and this is your team and see where he takes it.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm as a fan, I was hard on him at first. I was hard on the decision, but I think that we've done what I've expected to do as far as management decisions, and that credit to Kellen Moore. I wanted to give Spencer Rattler a real shot at trying to see what he is and what he could be. Clearly, he's not gonna be a starter. He's gonna be a career backup. And then give the rookie the reins and see what he can do and give him fair evaluation in some meaningful, well, not meaningful games, but divisional games are always
That's good.
meaningful. And I think that we're doing it the right way, and I agree with you. Give him another year. Let's see what he is when he wants to get a training camp. I don't think we have to rush to draft. How are we draft an offensive lineman that don't jump off, that can not that can read the snap and not get 100 false starts in the game? I would love that. But yeah, and not to jump in there. Let's jump back into playoff teams. I just thought that was interesting. We found a way to talk about both our teams there. Uh, but man, the Denver Broncos, man, I don't know what to say about them, man. Sean Payton has them rolling with 11 game winning streak.
Yeah, yeah, something like
It's
that.
insane to think that we're talking about them as one of those teams that are Super Bowl contenders. And I think the Eagles got a real good bounce back win in Vegas as well. You have some teams here that we can discuss that to be real true contenders. But like you say, the picture is kind of blurry. But when we look at Patrick Mahomes going down with an injury like this, he's never faced this type of adversity in his career. So it'll be interesting where he goes from here. But as far as like the just this field is just wide open.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen a year like this. It's been a while at least.
Yeah, no, I agree because you don't have the typical favorites that are up there. And you look at a team, even like you were just mentioning in Denver, that honestly, I think that at this point, I'm talking about a seeding standpoint, like I think that the AFC is going to run through Denver this year. Like, honestly, if they win this game that they have coming up, I think they play the Jaguars this weekend. Besides that, coming down the stretch, obviously we know what the Chiefs represent, so I think that that'll be another win for the Broncos, and I would have favored them in that matchup against the Chargers as well too. So I really think that if they don't slip up this weekend, I think that they are winning out the rest of the season, and I think that the AFC would run through them from a home field advantage standpoint. And that's tough when you have a guy like Sean Payton at the helm. I still I don't know why I just don't want to fully believe in Bo Nix at this point. I just don't want to
What is it
fully
week 15 and he's still
yeah,
not
yeah.
believe.
Like I still don't want to fully believe in Bo Nix, but I mean, what can you say about the results honestly at this point? And so
Well,
man, it's
I think
crazy.
one thing about it when you look at a Sean Payton offense, he always takes the pressure off a quarterback because he loves to run the ball and he loves to have a two back system where he doesn't have to rely on the quarterback. And I think that's what Bo Nix has done. And obviously, Sean Payton always comes with a good defense. He's had some good defenses with the Saints, and he's left that mark. So I mean, I think Denver's defense and playing in that cold is gonna be tough. But
Yeah.
like we talked about earlier, the thing is when you get into playoff football, you need a veteran quarterback that
Yeah.
knows the way of the land where the moment's not too big for him. So when you get an Aaron Rodgers that has to come through there, you get a Josh Allen that has to come through there. That's why I just continue to say that this thing is wide open, and it truly is. I don't think anybody can say, who they think is going to come out of the AFC or who's going to win the Super Bowl, but we'll try to do it here, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's just really interesting how the Broncos are constructed, and they are legitimate. I mean, you don't go 11-2 in this league without being legit. And Sean Payton, I mean, all credit goes to him and his coaching staff.
Yep, yep. And I think that you've seen also a resurgence from Cortland Sutton. I think he had kind of a little bit of a lull, honestly, in the middle of the
Yeah,
season. He got out to a hot start and then kind of hit a little bit of a wall, but he's been playing really well lately. And then seeing the progression of Troy Franklin as well, too,
yeah.
to be kind of more so consistent and viable target at this particular point. So it's giving Bo Nix some weapons to work with. I know that RJ Harvey was your guy coming into the season,
Yeah, yeah,
into all the
yeah.
fantasy
Yeah,
football drafts and
for
all
sure.
that kind of stuff. And so, seeing what he's been able to do, once J.K. Dobbins went down, as well too, I think has been really big for Denver. And so they're going to be a tough out, just like so many other teams, obviously in the conference. So,
And the way that Sean Payton strategized the game, the way that he manages the clock, I know he did some weird stuff in the fourth quarter this past weekend. And typically he's a little aggressive, but he knows how to win those gritty. It's two coaches that come to mind. Him, Sean Payton, and Mike Tomlin. They just know how to control the clock. They know how to muddy up a game, and they know how to hey, the best defense is gonna win. And that's what Sean Payton is good at, which is
Mhm.
is great in playoff time in the cold, where you have to control the ball, where you have to control the clock. So the Broncos are good, are really good. I think that they're really legit, and I'm excited as I continue to talk about this field in the NFL playoffs. But Ramon, we have the right to change our minds, and that's why we do this from a week in and week out basis. We're gonna put each other on the spot here. And right now, what team are we feeling? You know what I mean? What team are we feeling so far to make a legitimate run?
Yep.
Uh, and I mean, I can
Oh,
go first, or you if you're ready to
now,
prepare.
I'll ask you this. Are you saying that we're looking at it in each conference, or are we just talking one team in the whole league?
One team in the whole league. Let's do it like
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Everything.
Well, since I typically take it, I'm gonna let you. I have a team in mind, but I'm gonna let you take it first since it seemed like you ready to go over there. So,
Man, look, man, I I don't I'm not quite I'm going in between a couple teams. A couple things when I evaluate this is obviously coaching and obviously talent. What team is emerging out the rubble, you know. And when I look at the Los Angeles Rams, I think that, when you look at Coach McVay, I know that Devontae had a hamstring. They'll most likely sit him for the rest of the year so he could be ready to go for the playoffs. I have to look at a Matthew Stafford when we talk about veteran quarterbacks who's having an MVP season at 30. What is he, 37 years old? 30, is he 38, 30, 37?
something like that. Yeah.
I think that this is a team that really could make a run for the table. They had a real shootout between the Lions this past weekend, and I know that the Lions are kind of slumping, but I legitimately I'm liking the Rams right now. I mean, I think that they're the team to beat currently, and I do reserve the right to change my mind. If I want to set it off a little bit and make a hot take, I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers as I don't know. I mean, it's not just this game. It's just Aaron Rodgers. I'm not really ready to count him out when he's playing the way he's playing. They will be my close second, but I want to see how they look against the Lions this weekend. But ultimately, the LA Rams are the team that I like.
Yeah, I think for me, I really was kind of in agreement with that. But to take it to another team is the team that we've already discussed in this podcast. It would be the Buffalo Bills for me. You see a team that a couple weeks ago they actually did kind of dominate the Steelers that you were mentioning.
Yeah.
And so, to follow that up with two games where they did get down, and so we have to acknowledge the fact that they did get down, but to have the opportunity to rally back in both of those games with even the game against the Patriots being on the road to be able to do that. I think that they have just the second most veteran quarterback right there over behind Aaron Rodgers in that conference. And I think that when it comes down to it, that's one of the biggest things that matters is who you got at that QB position. And honestly, over there in the AFC, there's nobody that I trust more now, especially that Patrick Mahomes has gone down than Josh Allen, if I'm to be fully honest about it, especially with, Lamar Jackson still seeming to be a little bit compromised and not totally himself for some reason. So, to answer your question, it's the Buffalo Bills for me at this point. If I were to even kind of go out on the limb and, as you talked about kind of the Super Bowl prediction and who we may see there, I would be in agreement. I think the Rams are the best team in the NFC right now, and I would take Buffalo, honestly, in the AFC at this point.
Yeah, that'll be a matchup. Again, we reserve the right to change our minds. So after this week of games coming up, we will may shift gears and go with a different team.
Now,
But this is
now
where
we
we
gonna be
set
at
at.
the Shaq method where he always waits till the teams play two games in the series to make his series prediction.
Man, but shout out to Unc. But look, man, look, we can't let ourselves out of here. Speaking of Shaq, who's an LSU former LSU graduate, as we know, it has been reported that DJ Lagway, quarterback for Florida, has jumped in the portal, man. And as we know, that portal window opens up January 2nd. Lane Kiffin deems himself as the portal king. LSU, we currently only have one and a half quarterbacks. And the reason why I say that is because we have one quarterback that take a leave from the team, and the only one we have right now is Michael Van Buren, who might jump in the portal. Hopefully, he does. But we need some quarterback help here. Are you excited about the chances of maybe landing Lagway? It would make a lot of sense from me if we're not able to get Trinidad, if Trinidad's not able to get another year of eligibility.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you there. You know, if I had a pecking order, Trinidad Chambliss is at the top of that pecking order just because of him already knowing the system, being able to easily slide in. And I think that honestly, if he gets another year, he's going to find his way to Baton Rouge. But with that being the case, I think that Lagway still presents a lot of talent. We know that, you know, in his class that he came out 5-star, he was the number one quarterback in that class, was a top five recruit in that class. And we know, you know, kind of what he showed in the promise of his freshman year. Sophomore year, a little bit more up and down. We know what happened when he came to Baton Rouge and threw five of those interceptions, five of those
Yeah,
things
yeah,
in that
it
particular
did.
game. But I think that ultimately the talent is there. You know, there's been some injury concerns, but I think under Lane Kiffin, you would see him be at his peak form. You would see the best potential version that you could have of DJ Lagway. So I think that if, as you mentioned, Chambliss doesn't work out, DJ Lagway would be a good option.
Yeah, I agree, man. He's 6'3", 240 pounds. I don't think that going to Billy Napier will develop you into what you need to be. We've seen what he's done in his career on this type of level. Get him with Lane Kiffin. Let's get a quarterback, legitimate, a potential quarterback that might stay 2 years because he has to build his resume at this point. You know, as a true sophomore, I think he'll come to us as a junior, right?
He'd be a
Because he
junior.
started as a freshman.
Yeah.
So, he'll be a true junior. So, I think that you have a legitimate future. But again, I'm not mad at Trinidad Chambers if he's able to get another year eligibility. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's bring him with Lane. Let's have some fun down in the bayou. Look,
Yeah.
man, I think we did it again, Ramon. Shout out to all the listeners. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast, wherever you like to listen to your podcast at. We also on YouTube, so subscribe to that as well.